Princess of Wales pledged herself to serve her country and her people, and to maintain the precious principles of constitutional government which lie at the heart of our nation. She set an example of selfless duty.
The photograph went out at 9:14 in the morning, and within an hour royal watchers were staring at it like a crime scene. Catherine, Princess of Wales, standing centre frame, not beside, centre. The engagement itself was ordinary on paper. A visit tied to early childhood support, one of her established causes. But the positioning, the framing, the way the institution arranged the moment, none of it matched the quiet supporting pattern observers had tracked for years. Something in the choreography had changed, and nobody at the palace said a word about why. Hi viewers, before we go deeper, here's a quick one for you. If you had to guess in one word how Catherine has changed since returning to public life, what word would you type? Drop it in the comments right now, because by the end of this you may want to change your answer. According to reports circulating in the British press, Catherine's schedule through this period leaned heavily toward engagements that carried what commentators call continuity weight. Appearances tied to national stability, military families, and the long institutional story the monarchy tells about itself. King Charles III, meanwhile, continued his duties at a measured pace, a pace royal correspondents have openly linked to his ongoing health treatment, and William, Prince of Wales, appeared more and more in the structured, high-visibility moments that signal where institutional authority is heading. 3 figures, 3 shifting patterns, no announcement tying them together. In an institution where a change of brooch gets logged and analysed, that silence is not nothing. Silence, here, is data. Royal historians urge caution. They point out that workloads always shift inside a monarchy, that this is structural and ordinary, that reading too much into a seating chart is how bad theories are born. But even the cautious ones admit the timing is worth a second look, because the rearrangement seemed to arrive before any explanation did. And that gap between the change and the reason is exactly where this investigation starts. The next question isn't what moved, it's who decided it should move, and why no one felt the need to say so out loud. There is a stretch of days between 2 of the most widely covered royal appearances of the period, and royal commentators cannot fully account for it. Not a scandal, a gap, a quiet interval where the public calendar goes thin, and the usual rhythm of senior royal visibility softens. According to press analysis, intervals like this are often where the real work of the institution happens, not in front of cameras, but in the scheduling rooms and private briefings the public never sees. Charles remains sovereign. That does not change. But sovereignty in daily practice is layered. Duties get delegated, appearances get assigned. Someone decides who stands where and when and carrying which message. During this window, William's presence began turning up in roles that carried more constitutional weight than usual. Not a replacement of his father, a rebalancing of load, and Catherine's engagement started to resemble something the monarchy historically leans on during uncertain stretches. A steadying public face, a figure the country reads as calm, not power, reassurance. Royal biographers have long debated whether moments like these reflect deliberate planning or simply the institution absorbing pressure as it comes. The honest answer is that, from the outside, the two can look identical. What stands out is what's missing. No statement, no explanation, no press line framing any of it as a decision, only behaviour. And inside royal systems, behaviour tends to reveal more than official words ever do, because words are managed and behaviour leaks. The pattern through this stretch is consistent, Charles steady but spaced out, William stepping into heavier moments, Catherine appearing exactly where the public most wants to see a familiar, reassuring figure. 3 roles, quietly settling into place, which raises the question that no official source has answered. If the load is shifting, then someone, somewhere, decided how to shift it, and that decision has a date, a room, and a name attached to it that the public has never been shown. Royal correspondents kept using a phrase, and none of them would define it. Internal scheduling adjustments, A reference dropped into commentary again and again, never pinned down, never sourced, never officially confirmed. Mentioned, though, repeatedly. And repetition, in a closed institution, is its own kind of signal.
It's a very personal message from her, which has just been released, in which she explains what has been happening in recent weeks.
I wanted to take this opportunity to say thank you personally for all the wonderful messages of support and for your understanding.
This is where William's expanding role becomes easier to see, not in any new title because there was no new title, but in function, in what he was actually doing, week after week. He turned up in the appearances that carry institutional gravity, the ones that say, without saying it, here is where the future runs through. Catherine's engagements, meanwhile, kept aligning with moments that called for public calm, periods when the country needed a steady, recognizable presence more than it needed ceremony. From a public relations standpoint, analysts suggest this kind of alignment rarely happens by accident inside a machine, as managed as the British monarchy. Things get placed, people get positioned. The pattern is faint, easy to miss in any single week. But tracked over months, it stops looking like coincidence and starts looking like design. And patterns don't require a press release to be real. They only require repetition. They only need to keep happening until the eye can no longer ignore them. By this point, the repetition is plain. So the uncomfortable question arrives on its own. If William is filling more of the heavy moments, and Catherine is filling more of the steadying ones, then who has quietly stepped back from the space they used to hold so consistently, and why has no one explained the absence? King Charles III is still performing the constitutional role. That fact never wavers. But royal workload analysis reported across media commentary points to a redistribution of duties inside the senior ranks, a reshuffling of who carries what. In monarchy history, this is not strange. Reigns adjust. Older sovereigns lean on heirs. The machine has done this before, many times. What draws attention is the speed. William appears more often in what commentators call continuity framing. The appearances designed to project an unbroken line forward. Catherine appears more often in moments built around public stability and reassurance. Neither role comes with a formal name. Neither was announced. The institution simply let them emerge. Analysts have a phrase for it: functional emergence. Roles that exist in practice long before anyone gives them a label. In other words, the job shows up first. The title, if it ever comes, shows up later. And this is where history starts to matter, because royal biographers note that in past reign transitions, this exact phase, quiet role redistribution, no public acknowledgement, tends to arrive before the formal handovers do. Not sometimes, reliably. The cautious historians still wave their hands and say it could mean nothing. Workloads move, people age. Read nothing into it. But the speed keeps pulling the eye back. The pace of the adjustment feels faster than the usual slow drift of royal duty. Charles steady, William rising, Catherine steadying. The triangle keeps tightening, and there's one figure inside it whose reduced visibility is being noticed more sharply than anyone else's. A quiet stepping back that the palace has never framed, explained or named. Not absence, reduction. That is the careful word observers reach for when describing King Charles III's public pacing against what people had once expected of him. No crisis declared, no official limitation announced. The palace has linked his measured schedule to ongoing treatment, and beyond that, it has said little. Only spacing. A duty here, a gap there. Appearances spread further apart than the old rhythm. And spacing changes how the public reads a person, even when nothing official has changed at all. Into parts of that space steps William, filling the heavier institutional moments. Across other parts moves Catherine, steadying the public mood. Together it forms a kind of three-point structure in how the country perceives its monarchy. Charles as the anchor of authority, William as the face of operational continuity, Catherine as the source of emotional steadiness. None of this is official doctrine. There is no document that lays it out this way. It is observational mapping, a structure traced from the outside by watching who does what. But mapping reveals shape, and shape tells a story, often well before the institution is willing to confirm a single line of it. Royal historians, again, urge restraint. They note that perception is not the same as constitutional fact, that the public reads patterns into the monarchy the way people read faces into clouds.
It was a cold, blustery day, but I have never ever seen so many people here.
Fair enough. The caution is honest. Yet the three-point shape keeps holding, week after week, appearance after appearance, steady enough that it no longer feels like a guess. So the question turns. It stops being what is happening, and it becomes the harder one. Why is it happening now in this particular year, and what pressure made the timing feel so urgent? The questions stopped being about a single photograph and started being about a year. Why this year? Why this stretch of months? Why the rearrangement seemed to gather speed exactly when it did? Because every monarchy moves through pressure cycles, and royal historians say those cycles sharpen during three things: health transitions, generational planning, and shifts in what the public expects from the crown. By this point, all three were pressing at once. If you've ever felt a family quietly reorganize itself around one person's health without anyone saying it out loud, type "I've seen this" in the comments, because that's the human shape of what's playing out on a national stage. Charles's reign had entered exactly that kind of pressure window. His pacing, openly linked by correspondence to ongoing treatment, set the tempo for everything around him. William was not standing still, waiting for some distant handover. He was absorbing continuity responsibility piece by piece, appearance by appearance, and Catherine's role carried something harder to measure: public steadiness during a stretch when the institution felt uncertain at the top. This is where comparison to Diana, Princess of Wales, becomes hard to avoid in public discourse, royal biographers note. Not as equivalence. Catherine is her own figure, with her own way of carrying a room, but as an echo, because the public's emotional bond with the monarchy has always leaned on someone who feels reachable, human, warm in a way the institution itself is not. Catherine increasingly occupies that space, quietly, consistently, without anyone announcing she'd been handed it. The cautious historians, as always, say the comparison is overdrawn. But there's one decision point in this pressure year that commentators keep circling back to, a moment they believe may have set the whole acceleration in motion. Some decisions inside royal systems never get a turning point label, and that is exactly what makes them powerful. No press conference, no statement, no line drawn that says here is where everything changed. According to press interpretation patterns, this is precisely how internal delegation tends to work inside the British monarchy. Not announced, implemented.
My much-missed grandmother, who cared so much for the natural world. In times of loss, it is a comfort to honour those we miss through the work we do.
Done first, framed later, or never framed at all. Charles keeps the formal authority. Nothing in any of this touches his constitutional role, and no serious commentator claims otherwise. But William's exposure to the highest visibility continuity moments kept climbing through this stretch, and Catherine's presence kept growing in the context built around national reassurance. Once again, no formal explanation attached to any of it, which forces a structural question, and it's the sharpest one in the whole investigation. Is this adaptation, or is it preparation? The difference matters enormously. Adaptation responds to pressure as it arrives. It's reactive. The institution feels strain and shifts weight to cope. Preparation anticipates pressure before it lands. It's deliberate. It means someone looked ahead, saw what was coming, and started moving pieces early. From the outside, royal biographers admit the two can look almost identical in any given week, but they come from completely different intentions. One is a family absorbing a hard season. The other is an institution quietly readying itself for a future it hasn't described to the public yet. The cautious voices say there's no way to know from the cheap seats. Fair. But there's one upcoming event on the royal calendar that commentators have started reading differently because of all this. An event whose meaning may already have shifted before it even happens. Public royal engagements are never just events. They function as tests of visibility. Tests of who stands where during the moments that carry the heaviest symbolism, the ones the whole country watches, and how authority gets distributed during those high symbol moments often matters more than the event itself. Recent commentary suggests William and Catherine have grown increasingly central in exactly these moments. Not replacing Charles, he remains the anchor, and the framing always keeps him there, but reinforcing the continuity message around him.
Yesterday, the Princess of Wales continued her gradual return to public duties by visiting the National Portrait Gallery as part of her mission to shape a healthier, happier future for everyone.
The visual story that says the line is steady, the future is secure, nothing is wobbling at the top even during a hard year. This creates an unusual configuration when you map it out. A three-point monarchy in the public eye, the monarch holding authority, the heir carrying continuity, the Princess of Wales projecting steadiness. Royal historians point out that this shape is recognisable from past transitional periods. It has appeared before, in other reigns, during other handovers. But here's the part that stands out. It usually is not openly acknowledged while the transition is still happening. It gets named afterward, in the books, once the dust settles, and historians can label it safely. From a public relations standpoint, analysts suggest that's by design. The institution prefers the public to absorb a new arrangement gradually, to feel it as normal before anyone calls it a change. The skeptics, predictably, say a few well-staged photographs don't prove a structure. People see patterns everywhere, but the configuration keeps holding through event after event. So observers have started asking something bolder than before, whether this three-point shape already defines the monarchy right now, in the present, rather than describing some arrangement still waiting in the future. The hardest thing to spot in any institution is not the change you can see. It's the change that becomes normal too fast to notice. William's expanded presence no longer feels unusual to anyone watching. Catherine's heightened role no longer feels new. Charles's adjusted pacing no longer feels like a story. And that normalization is the real signal. The quiet one, the one almost everyone misses. If you've made it this far into the investigation, you're the kind of viewer who notices the things most people scroll past. So do this channel a favour and subscribe, turn on notifications, because the next story we're tracing is one you won't want to miss. Because in historical monarchy transitions, royal biographers note, the moment something stops feeling like change is often the exact moment the change has already finished happening. The eye adjusts. The new arrangement settles in. And one day people look up and realise the thing they were waiting for arrived months ago, while they weren't paying attention. That may be precisely where the monarchy sits now. But here is the complication that keeps this honest. No official confirmation exists. None. There is no document, no statement, no decree that lays any of this out as a formal plan. There are only patterns, observations, the accumulated weight of who stood where and when and how often, and patterns can be read more than one way. A skeptic sees an aging monarch and a family absorbing a hard year. An analyst sees a deliberate, quiet reordering of function. Both are looking at the same photographs, which is exactly why this stays an investigation, not a verdict. And the final piece of the pattern is the one no official source has ever stepped forward to explain. Lay every observation on the table at once and a shape appears. The scheduling shifts. The visibility changes, the slow redistribution of who carries the institution's weight. Put together, they form something, but it is never declared. It is inferred, traced from the outside by people watching closely, never confirmed from the inside. Charles remains central, the authority still runs through him, and the framing never lets the public forget it. William becomes steadily more operational, taking on more of the heavy continuity moments with each passing season. Catherine becomes steadily more stabilising, the reassuring public face during an uncertain stretch. Together, royal commentators suggest, they form a triangle of continuity perception. Three figures holding three corners of how the country reads its monarchy. But here is the detail that matters most, the one that explains everything while saying nothing. Nothing in this structure requires a formal announcement to exist, which means everything visible, every photograph, every appearance, every shift in position can be entirely real and entirely unconfirmed at the same time. And that, royal historians say, is the defining trait of how monarchies actually evolve. The change happens first, the explanation comes later, or sometimes the explanation never fully comes at all, and the public simply lives inside an arrangement no one ever formally described to them. The skeptics hold their ground to the end. Coincidence, they say. A family and an institution doing what families and institutions always do under strain. Maybe they're right. But the unanswered question isn't whether the structure exists. It's whether it's already being used, already shaping what the country sees and feels about its crown, in ways the public has not yet been told to notice. What do you think is really happening behind the palace walls? Share your take in the comments, because someone reading this needs to hear a perspective only you can give. And if this investigation pulled you in, subscribe and turn on notifications. The next story is one that inspires, and you won't want to miss it.